Hello, I'm Thomas Alva Edison, the most prolific and greatest inventor there ever was. I held a record 1,093 patents and even invented the word hello to start a phone conversation. I helped America rise to worldwide preeminence during the industrial age. In my lifetime, I created 14 different companies, creating thousands of jobs nationwide. My inventions and the improvements of other patents have helped billions of people worldwide. The hybrids of my inventions still surround all of us, as you all still live in a world that I helped create. So today I would like to tell you my most wonderful story from my humble beginnings to the man who became the inventor of the age. Well, it all started out at a 5,000 watt radio station. Oops, wrong century. I was born February 11, 1847 in Milan, Ohio. My parents were Samuel and Nancy Elliott Edison. My dad was exiled Canadian activist, and my mom was a school teacher. I was the youngest of 6 other brothers and sisters, and we all lived here. And I did not speak till age 4. And in 1884, I was taken to a one-room schoolhouse in Michigan, and there the teacher found me to be distracted, lazy, and difficult. That's because I had a hearing problem from scarlet fever when I was younger. And therefore I was a misfit and bored. And after 12 weeks of this, my mom took me out of school and homeschooled me. And I really appreciate my mom's understanding and the patience she had to deal with me, as she was the most influential person in my life. And I was very interested in how things worked and how the world operated in general and anything in science. So at a very early age, I sat on goose eggs and chicken eggs to try and hatch them. And by age 10, I set up a chemistry lab in my father's basement. However, my dad tried to bribe me for staying upstairs. By age 11, I was a ferocious reader, reading every single book that I could. And this self-taught mind improvement style, this intense curiosity, thirst for knowledge, and self-taught discipline would stay with me my entire life. By age 12, I was an entrepreneur selling fruit candy and newspapers on the Grand Trunk Railroad, which is a commuter train that ran between Port Huron, Michigan, and Detroit. And in the baggage car of that commuter train, I set up a printing press and printed a paper called the Weekly Herald and sold it to some 400 trained customers. And also in that same baggage car, I set up a rudimentary traveling chemistry lab. However, when one of my experiments went awry and the baggage car caught fire, I was dismissed from my train job. I guess I lost my train of thought. However, shortly afterwards, I got back on track and saved a 3-year-old boy from being run over by a train. His grateful father repaid me back by teaching me Morse code and how to use a telegraph, which is how people communicated many years back. And by 1862, or age 15, I was a tram telegrapher going to different cities around, sending and receiving messages. You see, my lack of hearing kept me out in the Union Army and the Civil War itself. However, the sound of the clicking of the telegraph helped me focus on my transcribing skills. See, I was 75% deaf, fully deaf in one ear and half deaf in the other. After age 12, I never heard a bird sing. And in 1868, when I was 21, I took a better paying job at the Western Union office in Boston, where I would take the night shift to quietly work on my experiments. And in 1868, when I was 21, I got my first patent, which was a vote recorder intended to help our state legislature tally votes in a very fast and efficient way. However, the state legislature didn't want fast vote counts, and they wanted to filibuster and change their minds of their local legislatures at the very last second. Since this was a commercial flop, I decided and vowed to make inventions that people actually wanted and would like and needed in the future. And late one night in the Western Union office, in the upstairs room there, I was working on some experiments, and I had some sulfuric acid. This acid then fell on the floor and seeped between the floorboards and dripped and dropped onto my boss's desk below. Needless to say, the next day I was fired for that, but it did help coin the late 1960s phrase, "Hey man, let's drop some acid." So, and a year later, when I was 22 in 1869, I actually improved upon a patent called the Universal Stock Ticker, and was information quickly printed on ticker tape. I was able to sell this invention to Western Union for $40,000, which is $500,000 in today's money. The first thing I did was help my parents, my dad, unemployed, my mom had some mental health issues. And then, by 1871, with the extra money, I was able to open up my own 5,000 square foot lab and small manufacturing facility in Newark, New Jersey, where I would employ 12 machinists, which I would call muckers because they got involved in the muck of things, as well as become a full-time inventor. And from this facility for the next about 5 years, we would improve on the speed of the telegraph, as well as delve into other practical communication skills, practical communication ideas and inventions. Here I would, in 1871, invent a prototype of the typewriter, which the Remington Company bought from me. And what I would do is I would, well, make an invention, patent it, and then sell the rights to another company, because I didn't have the manufacturing facilities to mass produce it, nor did I want to be a factory owner or an industrialist. I also invented wax paper that you all have in your kitchen drawers, which is called paraffin paper. So by this time in my life, I was had a couple dozen patents and was a force to be reckoned with. And in 1871, when I was 24, I met Mary Stillwell. She was in the telegraph office perforating paper. And I courted her and we married in 1871 on Christmas Eve. She was 16 at the time. And after the ceremony, I just went back to the lab and worked. And I kept working until late on at night. We would have 3 children together, Marion, Thomas Jr., and William. My first 2 kids I nicknamed Dot and Dash. However, I was very much an absent father, putting in 80 hours a week in the lab. I would forget birthdays, anniversaries, important dates, things like that. And I really never needed much sleep. I only slept 4 hours a night, sometimes taking short cat naps during the day. I thought sleep was a holdover from primitive man and not fit for a modern mind. And these, in 1874, with the help of my mucker co-workers shown here, I improved the speed of the telegraph and invented the quadruplex telegraph, which is capable of submitting 4 separate signals at one time. And a bit later on, 6 separate signals, and I was able to sell this to railroad tycoon Jay Gould for $100,000, which is $2 million in today's money. And with that capital, in 1876, I was able to open a larger facility in Menlo Park, New Jersey, a 35-acre spread that had numerous buildings on it. And from this facility, for the next 6 years, I would patent some 400 inventions. And I would often just work 40 or 50 hours straight at one time, sometimes sleeping on the lab floor. My mucker co-workers and I would work on a project all together, but approach it from different angles to be able to get a common goal, which would be a common product, with my name on it. You see, I'm a very focused, goal-driven man and very competitive. And I like to beat others at their own game of inventing. And that's because this was to make better inventions ultimately for people, better products, to make them useful and affordable. I never liked people that were less intelligent than me, so I devised a test of 150 questions in many diverse fields. And I'll tell you about that test in a minute. This was recreated, my Menlo Park creation, in the Greenfield Village in Michigan by my friend Henry Ford. And this test, well, I would give it to 500 applicants, but only 35 passed. You see, I was very much of a stickler on things. I'd have my workers work 55, 60-hour weeks at a time. And that's because results count for me. And I also would keep and would have 10,000 books, because I love to read so much, in my lab in my workplace home. These were practical, no-nonsense books, plus I was a free thinker, which means I wasn't interested in religion, and was a pacifist. I did not want my products used to harm anybody, but rather to help them. This comes from my upbringing with my parents. And plus I would keep 25,000 notebooks ultimately in my lifetime with my drawings, sketches, notes. And I would use a number 3 pencil because it was easy to work with. For me, it was always work hard, study hard, and play much later on. In 1876, I developed the perforating pen, which was a copying device that created stencils like a mimeograph machine. This consisted of a handheld electric pen powered by a wet cell battery. The motor drove a needle 3,000 times a minute to puncture special paper to make a stencil. Then an inked roller was passed over the stencil to make copies on paper. This idea was sold to a printing company to make the first mimeograph machines that were around so long you even remember them from your grade school years. The pen itself evolved into the tattoo pen. At this time in 1877, Western Union asked me to improve the telephone that Alexander Graham Bell made because it had limited sound quality. Actually, the voice on Bell's telephone only went 6 miles, and it had a crackly type voice. So, to solve this problem, I developed the carbon button transmitter to amplify the sound from it by using a special microphone, which would be in here. Roasted carbon buttons were placed just beneath the diaphragm of the transmitter on the phone. As sound waves moved the diaphragm, the pressure on the carbon button was changed, varying the resistance of the current to make a better quality human voice sound and to make it travel long distance. At the Menlo Park facility, I had a carbon shed to mass produce the carbon necessary to make Bell's telephone a commercial success with this added microphone. My idea was used in all Bell receivers until the 1980s. Now, I also developed a shell phone, a woman's shoe phone, a senior rotary cell phone, a banana phone, a old-fashioned phone, a phone booth phone, a mobile phone, and the duct tape phone right here. With the duct tape phone, I really had to go see my quack on that. I also developed Maxwell Smart shoe phone and those obnoxious East Indian call centers. At the Menlo Park facility lab in 1877, I developed the phonograph, and yes, that's a word I made up. A piece of tin foil was wrapped around a cylinder, and while the cylinder rotated from a hand crank, your voice would make a needle on top of the cylinder vibrate or shake. The sound vibrations would make a groove or line on the foil when you speak into the mouthpiece. The vibrations would be indented into the cylinder by the recording needle in a deep groove pattern, and a needle on the other side would play back what was just recorded. It had 2 diaphragms, 2 needle units, one for recording, the other for playback. The first words recorded were my words, "Mary had a little lamb." However, the tinfoil system was in the long run not an ideal surface for recording or playback. So later on, I would use wax cylinders here were used, as shown here and on the table. This is why the human voice had never been played back to anyone before, and this therefore caused a great commotion. Why in 1878 I even demonstrated this personally to the U.S. Congress and to President Hayes. Between 1912 and 1928, we sold 845,000 phonographs and 48 million records. The popularity of the phonograph led me to be called the Wizard of Menlo Park. I enjoyed developing products to make them useful, affordable, practical, and enjoyable for the common man and woman. Now, thank you, we would like to play you a selection from a 1906 Edison Model B. Isn't love a grand old thing? Well, as you can tell, some of those voices were used in The Wizard of Oz for the Munchkins. Also in 1877, I developed the talking doll, but it had a rather creepy voice and it didn't sell very well. The voice is much like Michael Jackson and Mr. Rogers put together. Now, people often say I invented the light bulb, and this is not true. I perfected it, not invented it. Actually, the incandescent bulb was created in 1841 by Sir Humphrey Davies. It used arc lighting, or an arc, right here, between 2 metal rods. An electrical current passed along a filament between the 2 rods. This light was short-lived, and as the filament between these rods would combust from resistance and cease to glow. In total, 23 light bulbs with very short-lived filaments were around before mine. Now, in the 1870s, we used gas lights to light streets and houses, but the gas took the oxygen out of the room, would have leaks, cause asphyxiation, and was not clean or safe. So there was a need to have a safe, long-lasting, dependable light with low voltage, say 110 volts, and high resistance. Our lab worked hard trying to find a filament that would not build up too much heat and resistance and combust. We tried 6,000 different types of material, and in 1879 found that carbonized cotton thread as a filament lasted 13.5 hours. The filament in light bulbs acts as a section of a current and therefore cannot break or combust. Of course, there had to be, a second here. There had to be a vacuum created inside the bulb. A glass bulb is surrounded, and a metal screw, which I developed actually 10 years later, that would hold it in place and conduct current. A few months later, in January of 1880, we replaced this filament with a carbonized piece of bamboo to make the light stay on for 1,200 continuous hours with a generator to power it. Now, people often say to me, "Why, Tom Edison, you're a real loser. You tried 6,000 things and you failed." No, I didn't. I tried 6,000 things and they just didn't work. But now we know better, and we're the wiser because of this. People don't really know how close they are to a goal, and they always get just short of it, and then they give up. But if you keep on trying, keep on going at it, you will eventually get your goal. This is called persistence, and this is why I was able to invent things, because I just kept going at it. This new lighting was radical and revolutionary for the day because no longer did we need to depend on the sun or inefficient and fixtures to live by. I thus made a 24-hour world which transformed our society. I made the first commercially practical mass-produced incandescent light bulb. I also developed the fluorescent bulb. Today, light bulbs use a coiled tungsten wire with argon gas in the bulb, which reminds me of the joke. How many inventors does it take to screw in a light bulb? One, just one to screw it up. With this incandescent lighting, I needed a whole array of systems to implement it. So I invented the circuit breakers in 1879. This is a mechanical device that will spring open and disconnect circuitry when unsafe current levels are reached. Safety fuses work in the same rough fashion. There also needed to be junction boxes, underground conduits, meters, like the Webameter to measure the amount of electricity, which is still used today, a 3-wire system that superseded the parallel circuit, and a device for maintaining constant voltage, plus a light socket with an on and off switch here to help out. Thus I needed a power station with large dynamos to maintain 110 volts at 90% efficiency. In 1880, I was then asked to electrify an entire ship at sea called the Columbia, which was a success. So I tried out my first power station on Pearl Street in Lower Manhattan on September 4th, 1882. I was able to light up 1 square mile for 59 customers with 240 lamps, using coal to generate electricity with large dynamos. Now we had to build these dynamos, shown right here, and keep them in areas like this. With this success, I was soon able to open up dozens of power stations in large metropolitan areas using direct current. Numerous city streets had to be torn up for underground wiring and above ground wiring also. Thus I needed a company to deliver the electricity to power and light cities, and I funded the Edison Electric Illuminating Company and the Edison Electric Light Company. This was the first investor-owned electric utility. However, I needed more extensive capital for this, and with the help of banker J.P. Morgan and the Vanderbilt family, solved this problem with cash infusion and credit power. And in addition to that, this is Edison, Detroit Edison Company, and in 1891, Henry Ford worked with us for 8 years here in this building. And I had a chance to talk to him and encouraged him to, later on, go forward with his gas-powered car. Well, he worked with us to 1899, was offered as being a supervisor job there for $1,900 a year. He turned it down and went to a company where he's only making $450 a month. I thought he was crazy, but he was able then to go forward and make his Model T, which he mass-produced, and the rest is history. So, and later on, Henry and I would be great friends for many decades, actually. However, the problem with direct current is that since it's low voltage, can only be generated short distances, it therefore needs a power station every mile or so down the road. So I offered one of my employees, Nikola Tesla, $50,000 to come up with a better delivery system for power. Tesla said alternating current was best, as it could extend power further out. Later, I reneged on my monetary offer, which made Tesla angry. Tesla then quit in 1885. And Tesla was very much an idealist, and he wanted power not only to be done through AC, but power to be utilized, it was his dream, through hydroelectric power, which was radical for those days. And Tesla was so much of an idealist that he's venerated by a lot of the younger generation people. And it made him a hero and me a cold capitalist and a calculating one. This then led to the current wars, which I'll get into. Not only did Tesla quit in 1885, he teamed up with George Westinghouse, and within 1 year they made 68 AC stations, and one's even powered by Niagara Falls. You see, AC requires higher voltage, but is able to transmit power much further than what direct current does. Now, having invested in 90 DC power stations, I'd have to change my whole system and better understand the dynamics of AC. And here is Tesla right here with one of his machines. And here is the dam that he used on Niagara Falls. It is now taken down and become a museum. Here is his system here. All the math behind this was backed up by a guy named Steinmetz, who thought that AC was better also. See, AC goes back and forth constantly because of a revolving magnet with a coil around it, and no charge is built up at the end of the line for it. But it is also very dangerous also, but it does extend power out further. This led to the current wars, as I was too stubborn and incensed by the Tesla Westinghouse group to admit that my DC system would only logistically work in high-density urban areas, that is, large cities. So I went on an extensive publicity campaign to discredit these people and AC power in general. I gave public demonstrations electrocuting pigs, dogs, and horses with AC to support my dangerous label of it. In front of 1,500 people, I publicly electrocuted with AC a circus elephant named Topsy, who had gone rogue, killing 3 people, and was about to be euthanized. Plus, I invented the electric chair, which used AC and would claim anyone electrocuted in it would be Westinghoused. The sole purpose of it, though, was to embarrass Westinghouse and Tesla. And because of my ill-tempered, outrageous actions and inability to adapt to the more practical AC, the board of directors relieved me of my command. It is difficult to invent and then run your own company to become an industrialist and business manager. Now, Westinghouse and Edison Electric then merged with Thomson Houston to create General Electric, a brand you all know. Here's how the label of GE changed over the years. And all of you have had, or sometimes have even now, appliances made by General Electric. To get away from it all, I bought land and built a house as a winter retreat in Fort Myers, Florida, with Henry Ford as my neighbor. However, a bit of tragedy occurred in 1884. Mary died at age 29. Now, Mary had a brain tumor and was sick for some time, and all the doctors could do was prescribe her morphine. And we've all been there before, which masked the symptoms. And this was very depressing to me, because here I am, a world-class inventor. I can't even help my wife, who was really deathly sick. So after she died, I had to make some changes in my life. The first thing I had, because I had 3 kids, a house to take care of, and a lab. So I had to get a cook, kids, a nanny, and a chauffeur. And then I had to go back to work because dozens and dozens of people were counting on me to provide them for their family needs. So and to solve this emotionally, I just worked even harder. And I worked harder for 2 years. Fortunately, I met and was smitten by Mina Miller, who was 19 and I was 38. In 1886, I met her. She was a philanthropist. Actually, she liked to talk to a lot of civic organizations and do good things for them, and was a daughter of a millionaire inventor. I quickly taught her Morse code and asked her to marry me by tapping out the big question on her hand under a table. I bought her a 23-room house called Glenmont in West Orange, New Jersey, which would be not too far from my lab. We would have 3 children together, Madeline, Charles, and Theodore. And here we are on the back porch. Now, you remember I had a daughter from my previous marriage. Her name was Marion, and she was 12 years old. Mine was 19. So there is a competitive jealousy between them, between the two. And this caused friction, but we did get through it. And in 1887, I expanded and built a 2-city block long industrial research lab in West Orange, New Jersey. It was 1 mile from my house. It was actually 60,000 square feet, and you can take tours of it here. And it had a library, my own library, with all those books that we've talked about, a music room on the 3rd floor, and a lab drafting room, and many different machine shops. And here I am with my co-workers right in the center here. You see, I was surrounded by men who were very good at their work, and that's why we're able to get so many inventions out because of them. I worked with them. I wasn't just some lab rat working in the laboratory. I needed to work with these people, I needed their input, and I had to get along with them to make this work out. And this was a 10 times larger than the Menlo Park lab, and the purpose of it was for creating knowledge and controlling application. It had 8,000 different chemicals, plus screws, vices, needles, wires, resins, oils, chains, work tables, specialized work tables and areas, heavy and light machines, and everything one would need to invent great things. Ultimately, 1,000 people would work there. And in the 1890s, I got involved with a major project that took up my time and money. I set up a large factory in the New Jersey area where I would extract iron from low-grade ore. The ore would be ground up and then passed by large magnets to obtain and isolate the iron. Thus, I invented the magnetic ore separator. Well, I put $10 million into this hole in the ground, plus 10 years, and even living next to it to the mine for some time. And it became too costly to work out, and this became known as Edison Phonograph. However, out of this, I did get a few phrases out of this, like metalhead, magnetic personality, chick magnet, iron poor blood, iron will, and anything ironic at all. And later on, though, I would use the plant facilities to form Portland Cement Company, that is to make cement and build low-cost, practical housing with poured concrete and massive wooden molds, like shown here. And Yankee Stadium, the original one, was built that way with this kind of idea in mind with the cement and my concrete. And here I am with, here are my lab workers that I had, and I would even use them to make cement apartment houses, as well as even phonograph cabinets and even bathtubs. And phonograph consoles, actually. However, I was able to put this also in these massive molds. Here I am trying to build some concrete houses with this. The concrete houses I developed were never sold, about 6 of them, and this was another bust. And here I am with a model of my concrete house that really didn't sell at all, but it was a valiant effort. As a practical joke, my employees once covered me in cement, saying I needed cement overshoes. I actually patented cement shoes and sold the rights to the New Jersey mob. And I also invented a phrase to be used by all people living in the New York and New Jersey area. And that phrase was, "Hey, you talking to me? Hey!" Somehow this phrase is only used by men named Tony or Joey and women named Maria or Roseanne. And whoever uses this phrase really has a hard time driving on roundabouts. In 1896, I invented the fluoroscope. Now, this was a device that if you held it up to your eyes, you'd be able to see through skin and into the bones of people and even into their brain. Now, one of my worker here, Clarence Daly, was using this, and Clarence would end up getting radiation poisoning. Both his hands had to be amputated because of using this eventually, as well as both arms. I paid for his hospitalization and gave him a great pension, and I even tried using this fluoroscope here and got damage in my right eye. And then I decided that I would never go near radiation again. We just didn't understand it at that time period, and we needed more safeguards. So I stayed away. And starting in the 1890s and later on, in the early turn of the century, I started to improve the lead acid batteries used to electrically power the first automobiles. And here are the workers working on these in my factory here. These batteries were heavy, leaked acid, and corroded. So I developed a lighter weight alkaline battery that used potassium hydroxide, which reacted with the iron and nickel electrodes. It was reliable, rechargeable, and dependable. And here's where we stored some of the batteries here to be used. Now there is this rabbit living in the storage area where we would store these areas he would gnaw on the electrodes and anodes and later become the Energizer Bunny. Even though I started producing this battery in my West Orange lab, the Ford Motor Company with its Model T started using gasoline instead to power cars. The rest is history because gasoline is cheap and plentiful. Now, I also developed a camera capable of capturing motion and was the first optical recording device in 1891. It took more than 24 pictures per second, thus simulating movement when shown rapidly. In 1893, I invented the kinetoscope, which is the forerunner of the modern movies. This device used a strip of film that went through here that was developed by George Eastman of Eastman Kodak that was passed quickly between a lens and a light bulb underneath. The viewer standing up would peer through a peephole and would get a momentary view of the 46 frames passing in front of the shutter every second to give the illusion of motion, as shown here. This would be all rotating so you'd be able to see it. Now these were simple short films about 50 feet long, and Fred Ott Sneeze was the first film produced, and he was an employee of mine. And later on we had Annie Oakley in one of these films, target practicing and showing off her shooting skills. These kinetoscopes were put in penny arcades and a nickel was used to activate them. However, after a while, people got tired of jumping from one console to another to watch these films. So, we filmed longer films at first at a wooden shed called the Black Mario. It was a shed that was painted black with a retractable roof and a huge window in the ceiling and revolved on a base pushed by workers, so the actors would be illuminated by the sun. This was the first film studio. And by 1894, 75 films were produced, including dancers, dramatic action, depicted historical events. Later, the Edison Company produced over 1,700 movies. Plus, we were able to sync the film speed with the phonograph speed to get the sound with movies. So to project films for larger audiences, we improved upon an already developed projection system called the Vitascope and called it the projectoscope. We made dramatic movies like in 1903, The Great Train Robbery, and even Jack and the Beanstalk here, plus numerous vaudeville acts and skits. Now, and by today's standards, these kind of sets, which are just painted sets and two men in a cow suit, would be comical in today's standards. But if you were a farmer back, say in Iowa, and came to a big city on Saturday night, you would be impressed by the film you would see because you've seen nothing like this ever before. This was a first. No one had ever shown people moving like this and then talking at the same time. The reason Hollywood came into being in existence was to get away, as far away from me as possible. This is because film companies didn't want to infringe on my omnipresent film, camera, and projector patent rights. The Ninth Circuit Court in California was more lenient to patent rights infringements, plus they had better weather out there, so that's how we got Hollywood. On a personal note, my son Thomas, when he got older, was involved in some shady business dealings, selling spurious gadgets like the Magno electric vitalizer to the public under the name of Thomas A. Edison Jr. Since these fraudulent products had my name on it, I paid my son $25 a week for him not to sully my household trademark name that consumers trusted. You see, my name had turned into a brand name with a reliable national reputation. And starting in World War I came about, particularly around 1917, I got involved with the consulting board with the U.S. Navy, and I conducted experiments on actually 48 major wartime problems like defense against U-boats, an underwater searchlight, ship telephone system, the first practical radar, anti-torpedo nets, smokescreen devices, aiming and firing devices, and direction finding devices. And I also discovered the process for manufacturing synthetic carbolic acid. Now, carbolic acid was used in artillery shells, but also in my phonograph records. And the excess that I had of the carbolic acid, I sold to Bayer Pharmaceutical in Germany. They synthesized it, made it into acetylsilic acid, which became aspirin, and that's how we got Bayer aspirin. Now, I worked with them for 18 months. Here I am in the center with the consulting board, by the way. And I worked off of in Key West, and I worked on a yacht doing this. It was called the USS Sachem, and it was with the vessel would be able to conduct my experiments on. I conducted 48 experiments for them. It was really for preparedness for war-related defense ideas, not offense. And then between 1915 and 1924, Henry Ford, myself, and Harvey Firestone, the tire magnate, and John Burroughs embarked on a series of summer camping trips, and we called ourselves the Vagabonds. There were trips into the forested and wilderness areas of New England, West Virginia, North Carolina, northern Michigan, Vermont, and Virginia. We camped in the Catskill Mountains, the Adriatics, the Smoky Mountains, and the Appalachian areas. The trips became very large and organized over the years, comprising over 50 vehicles. This armada carried photographers, household staff and equipment, a cook, kitchen, camping car, cots, tents, chairs, and a table that sat 20 people. After 1924, our trips gathered too much attention and they were discontinued. After World War I in the 1920s, when I was over 70 years old, I got involved in working with my close friend Henry Ford to help find a plant to be grown in the U.S. that could provide latex to make natural rubber for car tires. You see, the rubber tree only grows in tropical climates, and bringing that latex back to the U.S. to make rubber tires for cars was costly and cumbersome. So after testing thousands of species of plants, we settled on a species of goldenrod to get latex. However, later on it became clear that synthetic rubber based on petroleum was to be the material of choice for cars, and this was abandoned. And other products you might not know I made were the dictaphone, a wax cylinder dictating machine, a dictating machine in the 1880s, electric railways. These are really battery powered, but they were very heavy and really didn't go that far. And the universal electric motor, and ship communications, that is ship-to-shore communications. And on a personal note, well, I would often dress down a bit, wear shoes that were 2 sizes too big for me, because I really didn't like tying them. And I would come up with these homilies, like genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. This was all done to attract attention. See, I didn't have the showmanship qualities that Tesla had, nor did I have his rigorous academic background. I had no formal training at all. So everything I did in my lab, well, I did my tedious experimentation over and over again in the lab. You see, science is about repeatable results, and that's what I needed. Now, people often ask me, why, Mr. Edison, why don't you do something about your hearing since you make all these inventions? Actually, I was very comfortable the way I could hear. This helped me focus and concentrate on my work. No distractions. That's what I liked. And here I am with my family. And in 1926, I officially retired as I was 79 and had health issues like kidney disease, digestive ailments, and diabetes. To ease matters, I just drank a pint of milk every 3 hours to sustain myself because I had these problems. At this point, I was worth $170 million, which is $3 to $5 billion in today's money. And I was sometimes confined to a wheelchair, and with Henry Ford, I would have wheelchair races. However, on October 18, 1931, I died at age 84 from complications related to diabetes. And my last breath was captured in a test tube and sent to Henry Ford. 40,000 people came to see me lying in state, about 2,000 an hour. President Hoover urged all Americans to turn off their lights at 10 p.m. following the funeral as a tribute to me. So emphatically, yes, I had a most splendid life, as most of my inventions and hybrids of them you still see here today. And I work tirelessly to improve, invent, and make a more efficient, useful, practical, and enjoyable world we can all share. And thank you. That is the end of my presentation.